Hello and welcome. It is All for United on what has been just a rubbish afternoon, if we're brutally honest. But we are here nonetheless, as we are every Saturday, in order to have a little chat. But just before we do, and we welcome in Mr. Neville properly on his return to the channel. He's been a little bit of time off for this young man. He's been out partying and all that jazz. But before we do, we obviously need to address the frankly outlandish week that has been Manchester United and our life as fans. So I'll begin by reading out the statement in case you haven't seen it already, because it goes on Twitter. And it says as follows: All for United and All for United WFC wholeheartedly stand with the overwhelming condemnation of any return to the football club of Mason Greenwood. As one of the few channels that supports and covers both the men's and women's team, we feel the way in which the club has handled the whole situation has been unnecessarily haphazard and upsetting to vast swathes of the fan base. As per our previous statement, we will continue our policy of not discussing the situation further past this evening's show, where our hosts will reiterate our standpoint, which you can see we have just done. The only things to add to such a thing really here, Dan, is just how much hurt there has been as a club and the division that has been seen. There's hurt here for fans. There's hurt for people who might have been victims or have lived through domestic abuse, the families of the people involved as well, the women's team, which was targeted through some just frankly diabolical reporting that led to them looking like they were going to be the key reason for the decision being made. Even the United men have been dragged in their own way as to whether or not they are or are not in favour of the return. There's been a few things that have gone about that I think are worth pointing out. The first thing is that people talk about forgiveness and they forget the fact that abused spouses, wives, girlfriends tend to go back 7 times on average to their partners before finally leaving. The second thing that needs to be pointed out, I think, are the people that talk about the fact that he has a job and a family that he needs to provide for. And I think the point that we'd like to finish off with is that no player has the right to play for Manchester United or indeed any professional football. To be and live the life of a professional footballer is a privilege. What was heard on that recording, really, when it's stripped back, is the only thing that should be concentrated on, because it's the only thing that we have that could be seen as evidence in any way, shape, form or fashion. And I think we just need to step back and ask ourselves the question: are you comfortable having somebody who can make that level of threat against anybody, let alone a woman, playing for your football club? And that is why we have released the statement that we have. Dan, anything that you would add to that?
Well, honestly, I think it's been summed up perfectly today by everybody at All for United. It's a tough situation for those involved, for those outside. I wish the club had dealt with it much better. They've allowed it to escalate, get worse. They've had so many opportunities. The only thing I would add really is it's up to the club now to. It's pretty obvious that a decision was made and the investigation was finished. So irrelevant of whether they're doing a U-turn, irrelevant of whether the decision's being made, they just need to make it now. They need to finish the decision, and then everybody can make up their minds after that. I'd just like to reiterate my point of view, which is I hope, because of the alleged incident, he doesn't return. And the faster that is the decision they come to, the better for everybody involved at the club.
Absolutely. And there it is. That's the first 5 minutes of the show taken up. And that is all the airtime we will be giving to that until such time as the club makes a further official statement on it. We felt we needed to respond to the official statement that had come out, which frankly nothing. But there we go. That's been done now. And let's hope the right decisions are made. It feels a bit churlish to carry on talking about football beyond these sorts of things, but it doesn't change the fact that there was a football match tonight, gentlemen. I think the vast majority of us wish there hadn't been, because that's a couple of hours of our lives we probably won't get back. Dan, I would start with you. You had a nice little chat already, so we'll bring John in now. John, season ticket holder, you spent lots of time at Old Trafford as well. It wasn't our game today, was it? What was your thoughts? Because the first half I felt was actually quite positive. We just couldn't put the ball away. What did you make of the game?
Yeah, like you said, first half there was probably not a lot in it. Like you say, we were perhaps the slightly better team. Created a few chances. Bruno had obviously a really, really great chance with the header, which he made a complete mess of. So we could have, quite realistically gone in front, gone into half time in front. And, I was thinking, we might just hopefully kick on and, just turn the screw in the second half and come away with the result. But unfortunately, it was the complete opposite that happened. And we were just, completely fought and outplayed. And it was a disaster, really, from there on in.
I think disaster's probably been quite polite. It was the 200th game between the two clubs, Dan. And quite frankly, it's not one that I think is going to live as long in the memory as that wonderful day when Spurs were 3-0 up and we just absolutely romped past them in the second half. You could argue it was a bit of a turnaround in fortunes in that, because the first half in that game, Spurs obviously dominated and we came out of the trap second half and turned it round. In this one, we absolutely dominated that first half, with the exception of possession. We had more chances, more efforts, all of that. But it wasn't to be. That second half generally was just unacceptable, really. You're going to speak louder.
I'm muted again. I personally wasn't hugely impressed with the first half, in the sense of what Ten Hag wants to do is dominate games of football. In essence, he wants to do what Spurs did to us in the second half. And we just don't seem to be able to do that for whatever reason. We genuinely look our most threatening when we're winning the ball back quickly and breaking quickly. I've been saying it for a few weeks. It looks as though we're still sort of stuck in what Ollie wanted to do, which was a quick break, quick sort of a job there. But the game today, I thought we conceded so many chances. Even in the first half, they hit the post twice. I know one was a deflection, but we just seemed to open up really easily. I don't think a single pivot's working. You saw today with Mount, I think he dropped, in comparison to Wolves last week, quite a distance backwards to try and protect. I'm not blaming Casemiro. There's a lot of Casemiro blame dropping around at the minute. I don't agree with that. I just don't think the single pivot is working very well for whatever reason. It's not suiting the team. I've been banging a drum of for quite a while, and I've said it. This is why I like doing the show, by the way, because I've said it for a few weeks. The second team, or so-called second team, has looked better in Ten Hag's formation and what Ten Hag wants to do than some of the first team players. And my question as we kicked off was, what did he see in training this week that meant he would pick the same team as whatever that performance was last week, in which Wolves, obviously we'll go into a bit later, thoroughly battered us and somehow we won. So, I mean, I'm all for, give them a second chance. If they drop out a 10-10 performance, it's sort of indicated, but they didn't. They looked off it again, more so in the second half. I think the first half we was good. We created chances. Just very, very worried about how many chances we were giving up in general, and how often we was giving the ball away in general. I always go back to the Maguire Lindelof pairing a few seasons back. I think it was Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's second season, and between them they made very little errors that led to shots, never mind goals. And I just think at the minute the defense there seems to be a bit of a disconnect, and we're making a lot of mistakes leading to shots at goal. I don't know. I'm really disappointed today, to be honest. My concern is Spurs have brought in, I can't pronounce his name. the manager, and he's got them doing his sort of football instantly, and he's done it by Højbjerg, for example, was a mainstay last season, and he was really good for Spurs in the games I watched him. This guy's come in, he doesn't fit his system, and he's gone, off you pop. These two lads are better than you at what I want. And I think there's when you look at the team, there's this square holes, round circles sort of a job going off. Fernandez back on the right. Is anybody a fan of that? Sancho being left out after his preseason form. Not really a fan of that. It's just a lot going off where I think I'm looking to next week, and I said it a few times last season as well. Are we going to see the same team again? He seems to have his favourites and the players that he wants to play, and it seems no matter what the performance, those players will be given another chance, and so-called like the fringe players won't get the chance. I really thought Sancho would start today.
But we're a bit harsh down on managers sometimes when we talk about favourites, because I would think 99% of all managers have their favourites who they play, people that they trust. And that's what it's about, really, isn't it? Is you build up that trust with a group of players, a nucleus of players that do well for you, and you are likely to turn to them in times of need.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that description of it. It's perfect. But the problem is, I'll go to one player, and I hope I don't get too much grief for this. Someone tell me the last time Luke Shaw had a good game at left back.
Well, I wouldn't say he's had bad games over the last.
I'm not saying he's had bad games. I'm just saying, when was the last time Luke Shaw dropped to 10 at left back? It's been a while. When we lost, was it 7-0 to Liverpool? Ever since then, he's not been the same. But he just seems to be retaining his place no matter what, because it's Luke Shaw. I saw someone suggest that Bruno Fernandes should have been dropped for this game, and I can safely say I laughed my whole off reading it. I thought it was hilarious. But after the performance he dropped today, it's like, yes, it's Fernandes and you can't drop them, but I think that's the thing. Really, he said something tonight, Tenor. He said that Donny van der Beek and Williams were not part of the squad because it's clear they've got their eyes on a move. But it's also clear they're not going to get given a chance. No matter how bad the first team play, there's not going to be much rotation from them first 11, irrelevant of what happens.
John, would you go along with this? Donny van der Beek and Brandon Williams, they're not likely to necessarily put up trees, are they, in that first team squad, John?
Probably not, no. I mean, there was obviously Maguire missing as well today, so whether he just doesn't want anybody around the squad that's, potentially going to be, leaving shortly, although having said that, Maguire was on the bench on Monday night, so I'm not quite sure what.
My understanding on Maguire was a minor injury. That's what Fabrizio Romano was throwing out there. So,
okay, fair enough. But yeah, it's like I say, it doesn't look as though anybody else is going to get much of a look in. I mean, like McTominay didn't get, he didn't get on today at all, which he thought he might have. He might have come on at some point with how the midfield was struggling. But on the Luke Shaw point, he certainly seems to have, that move to centre back last season. He seemed to play have his better games there than at full back of late. But he was certainly, like in no man's land for the first Spurs goal today. I just couldn't believe that nobody got out to the side there to try and stop the Spurs player getting in the box. It was just laughable, really, how easy it was for them for the first goal today.
Yeah, and how dangerous is Kulusevski as well? And you're leaving him with that much space. It seems incredible to me. But this is what I mean. This seems to, and Box has got it spot on there. This time last year, you could blame De Gea, Maguire, Fred Lindelof, Donny, Vega, Sabitzer, etc. And it's happening again. I've seen it tonight. So Martial's got the blame. Someone said Martial coming on, and what's the point in coming on? But he wasn't the issue. Yeah, I get that he's coming on off the bench and he's on 250 grand a week, and we probably should move him on. But is he the issue? Is he going to be the issue going forward? Probably not, because he's probably going to leave. I think it's about time we looked at. I can't keep watching Bruno Fernandes play on the right of midfield. It's baffling to me. When we've got Jadon Sancho that's very adequate of being there. And even Palistri's looked good in the 2 games he's come on.
Well,
I just think
something that I've really wanted to ask about this, because the Women's World Cup has been going on, as we all know, and I've been banging a drum big time about the fact that Rachel Daly, who was the WSL's top goal scorer, shouldn't be playing at left back, because you wouldn't ask most people to do that. Your top scorer, we wouldn't ask Rashford to play left back specifically. Having said that, though, we do seem to be playing players at the moment out of their usual sort of positions. Fernandez, as we said, has had to move out onto the right, which he's not the most effective from. Rashford, who we know is more effective from the left, being asked to play centrally because of the fact that we don't really have a recognised striker. Even Mason Mount seems to be playing in a deeper role than we would be expecting him to, because he's generally an attacking midfielder. So where do we stand with that? Is this something where we're just going to have to give this squad time? And it might well be that this season is a bit of a learning phase. Or do we need to be considering the fact, like you say, that there are other players out there who could perform those roles? I mean, the Jadon Sancho poll that you put out on All for United, Dan, overwhelmingly said that Sancho had done enough to earn a starting role against Spurs this weekend, but not hide nor hair did we see of him till gone the hour mark. So, where do you two stand on that? What's going on with these players? Why are we putting players, like you said, square peg round hole? Why are we putting them in these positions where they're being asked to do a job, as opposed to putting players whose job it is to do that? It's like calling a plumber when you need an electrician.
I'll let John start on that one.
It just seems like we're in a bit of a limbo at the moment. We're sort of stuck with players that, Ten Hag probably doesn't want there and wants to get rid of, but doesn't seem to be able to. And then consequently, we can't sort of buy replacements till we've got the money for the ones that he wants to get rid of. Apparently, there's not the money there. Any more money there for transfers? We've already spent big on 2 players already, so it seems as though we're lacking a bit of an awkward position, really, trying to get obviously we're in need of midfielder and another forward, but it looks like it's going to be difficult to get anybody in till we've got rid of 1 or 2 others.
Yeah, no, I agree with the sentiment behind it. My issue is just, again, Box has got his spot on. You look at Newcastle and you look at some of the players that have come to the fore there. Dan Burn would be one in particular. They were struggling for a defender. They brought in Dan Burn. Everybody laughed. It turns out he's been absolutely immense since he went to Newcastle. De Serbi as well, another one, just turning routes for players. We seem to be. It seems to be like, because Bruno Fernandes is Bruno Fernandes, you would prefer to have him on the pitch on the right than not have him on the pitch at all, which I understand. But we're losing so much from him being on the right. Surely we'd be better off sticking him in the middle and putting Pellistri on the right and stop trying to force players in positions where maybe they don't fit. It worked with Luke Shaw last season in particular. I just think, and even in pre-season, you had Fernandes, the left back, looked incredible. When he was asked to do what Ten Hag wanted him to do, he looked like he could follow the instruction. He could stay in the position. He could sort of do what he was being asked to do. But he's not going to get a kick of the ball this season, is he? And I don't know why. It confuses me, because I've seen these players in pre-season, and I made this comment a few times, that the second team in many of the games looked more comfortable with what they was being asked than the first team. But then these players now have sort of been scattered away, loan, sold, blah. And then these are the players that are still getting the blame for these really below par performances, when it's the same 11 as last week that's had a below par performance this week. But you'll hear that we need to get rid of Maguire because Maguire is the biggest problem at the club. But he didn't start all the games last season. And we still, we had a really good season, don't get me wrong, but we're still struggling with these players off the back of it. I just think the players that he trusts, and they're Anthony's going to start again next week, and no doubt in my mind, but he's had 2 bad games. How many more bad games before Pellistri goes, well, hold on a second, this guy could play bad for 20 games and I'm still not going to get a kick. So why would you want to wait there? Do you know what I mean? Like, Rashford doesn't work through the middle, does it? So we need to try something different next week, because we're missing Rashford off the left. Garnacho, for me, we've had this discussion pre-season, all of us, and everybody. He's been brilliant, but he's still a young kid. I still think his best for us is going to be coming off the bench this season and winning us games.
It's interesting because you do hit a point. If Rashford doesn't play centre forward, Martial does, would be the guess. But equally, how many games will Martial last? It's not necessarily
45 minutes.
45 minutes. So, what sort of situation are we in where we don't have a recognised striker who could play if Anthony Martial isn't there? Hello, Dav. Nice to see you. But it's been relatively negative so far. So let's try and look at some of the positives and try to do what we can with that. Rashford had a shot that was saved. Mason Mount had a shot that was blocked. Rashford's header went over. Bruno Fernandes, what a chance he had there. We could have just had a little bit more precision. It'd have been all right as well. And even Anthony after the goal, with a good attack, had a really good opportunity to curl the ball and hit the post. One thing we can't say about this, which can we compare to the Wolves game, we made the chances this evening. We had the opportunities to put the ball in the back of the net. We just didn't. And that is a progression from the last match. So is that something that we can start looking at the positives for moving into next week?
I think there was, like I say, some positives in the first half with some of the build-up play. Like I say, it was sometimes just there wasn't just that final pass or applying the finishing touch. Rashford and Fernandes, as you mentioned, had a couple of chances. So there's a bit of something to work there. There was a bit of positivity with some of Onana's passing in the first half. I mean, there was one where he was sort of almost on the halfway line, and he pinged a crossfield ball that was sort of Paul Scholes-esque out to the other side. That I must admit was very very sort of promising. So fingers crossed we've got got something there that might be a bit more of a positive outlet for us.
That pass was ridiculous. It was so good.
That was ridiculous about it. That's how far out of his goal he is. He's literally on the halfway line. And
we had a joke pre-season. How many games in before he's at the halfway line? Turns out 2. 2 is the answer.
Unreal. But what a pass it was to Garnacho.
Yeah. It was.
Dan, your thoughts on the chances? I forgot to say Casemiro also had a header that was saved. Chances were there.
Yeah, the chances were definitely there. I don't want to be overly critical because it's one of them. My criticism comes from stuff I've sort of been saying for 6 months or so, and just the worries in the back of my head in terms of going forward. Is he going to drop these players if the form doesn't come back? I hope he does, because that's what strong managers have to do. But the chances we created today, it's sort of a game changer. You think about the penalty incident as well. The Rashford header, the Fernandes header, that has to go in. It really does. And you would expect a player of his quality to score that relatively easy. So, I mean, this has been a problem for not just under Ten Hag. It's been a problem for years getting goals. Our goals came from Rashford being in some proper form last season. So it's no doubt we need Højlund back or fit quickly. But it worries me that because it makes us sound so one-dimensional that we need a striker to come back, then that's that. You can see other teams will lose 3 players, they'll change a little bit, and they're still fine. My worry is the lack of movement off the ball, but we was much better today in the chances we created. We just seem to lose our way in the second half. I don't really know why. We just sort of come out and we wasn't doing what we did in the first half. I'm still going to give the midfield a benefit of the doubt of they need more time together. They need more time on the training pitch. It's not going to come together in 2 games. There has to be a realism that it's going to be a long season. I think I predicted we would finish 4th. And I think 4th and another trophy run, a final appearance, would be a half-decent season because it's going to take time to build.
We're going to get to that later on. It'll be quite entertaining, I'm sure. But listen, you're right. Eric Ten Hag himself said that Mason Mount's going to need time in the position that they're putting him in. So, very good points. And to reiterate, at half-time, Spurs had most of the possession. It was around about 57% to them, 43% to us. But although we both had 3 shots on target, they'd managed 7 and we had mustered 14. So, like I say, a much better performance from the boys in that respect. I want to have a little bit of a chat. You mentioned the penalty, a little bit about the referee's performance. The first thing I wanted to talk about was a couple of bookings that were received in the first half. Aaron Wan-Bissaka booked effectively for not moving out of the way of a free kick. And, of course, Bruno Fernandes getting booked after Anthony got booked. Anthony's possibly a booking. It was a foul at the end of the day on Udogie. But then Bruno Fernandes whinging about it and getting himself a yellow card as well. Where do we stand on that, John? I always felt that the captain had a right to talk to the referee. Do you think that the yellow card came purely because it might have been a bit more of a petulant discussion rather than a mature discussion, for want of a better term, or is it just the case that you just can't talk to the refs at the moment?
I think with Bruno, we sort of know what he's like. He struggles to keep his himself in check a lot of the time, and he's got booked for it quite a few times in the past. So I think this season he's going to really have to be a lot more careful when he's approaching the referee. I mean, I suppose, like you say, he's maybe got a little bit of tolerance with him because he's the captain now. But with these new rules, you do worry that he's going to get himself in some trouble this season. You can soon pick up 2 daft yellows with these new laws that have come into effect. I mean, it's like the Wan-Bissaka one. That was sort of nothing really, and all of a sudden, that was sort of halfway through the first half, I think. So, fall back on a yellow card that early, you're having to tread very carefully. I think Spurs player got booked for something similar in the second half, where he sort of took the ball away with him when we wanted to take a quick free kick. So, yeah, you can say there's going to be some a lot more cars going to be picked up this season. But I just hope that Bruno can, keep himself calm enough that he doesn't start getting himself needlessly sent off or anything like that.
I mean, it's a perfectly good point, isn't it, Dan? And I think you ask yourself the question, would Maguire have got himself booked in that situation? And I'm not convinced he would have. Is that the difference between the two in terms of a captaincy, that Bruno is going to be a bit more vocal perhaps and in your face with regards to how he wants people to get on? And what do you make of what Box has put here about Bruno? You see a deterioration in his game the more he starts to moan, and that therefore if he feels that he needs to be vocal like that, could that be something that sort of hurts Bruno's gameplay, or do you think that's all just a myth?
I've actually seen a few people say that today, in terms of his quality and his game drops off a little bit once he starts to get a little bit irate. I can see what they mean. Like towards the 89th minute, he was just giving the ball away every kick and throwing his arms up in the air, and he wasn't happy with what was happening. And honestly, if Maguire was acting like that, there would be a reaction to it. So I can see why people would be frustrated by it. Ultimately, it's the remit now. They've been told what the referees are expecting. They've been made fully aware of it. We've seen it, and let's be fair to the officials here, other than the decisions, but that particular part, they've been really consistent with it. Players have been getting booked for time wasting, trying to stop free kicks, getting too close. The Bruno one did confuse me because it didn't look overly aggressive, and he is the captain, so I thought you were okay to do that, but obviously not. I think all of the footballers and managers are aware that it's not going to be tolerated this season, and I think you'll see it clamped quite well. I would put money on Bruno being sent off at some point this season because he's gone at a referee and he's on a yellow card or something like that. But I mean, I used to love Wayne Rooney for that sort of thing. It's part of his game. You've got to accept that sometimes he's got that fire in his belly. It's the same reason why he plays outrageous balls and stuff like that. So
definitely clipping that one down. That's for absolutely sure. Just for posterity, of course, you understand. But listen, you're right. First game for Stevens women last weekend. I had a chat with the referee beforehand, and it's exactly what they've been asked to do. You know, all of the things that we would call piddly, interesting things that weren't really that consistent last season, 100% going to be more consistent now. Kicking the ball away, delaying the game in any way. And it's all to do with the timings, isn't it? And wanting to add more time on at the end. So hopefully the idea is that eventually people will get into that process and understand that they can't do it anymore and that therefore the game should be a lot more free flow. And I'm all for that if they manage to do that. But yes, it will take some time. The other official decision we needed to talk about was at two ends, actually, because there were penalty shouts at both ends of the pitch. Spurs in the second half, Romero and Maddison were both impeded, they felt, but also a handball potentially in the penalty area for United. So potential penalties at each end. I'll ask you for your thoughts in general. To me, it was handball. I can't see how it's not. And the reason why I would say this is, again, because the arm's out of the body. But again, you've put a poll out there, Dan. I'm going to give the results of that poll as it stands at the moment. The last time I checked, the question was, do you understand the handball rule anymore? With the answers being yes, no, or are we even now? And no was winning the last time I checked. I actually went for are we even now? Because I haven't seen United be given a penalty for handball. In fact, I've seen us penalised a lot for handballs and things like that around the area and not getting the rub of the green in that respect. What are you making of that, you two?
I mean, I thought when I saw it back, I thought that should be a penalty. I mean, you know, it's a shot it's going towards goal. He's got a massive, you know, hand on it. That's deflected it out for a corner. I mean, he was quite close to the shot, but not. You know, he wasn't sort of, you know, right on top of. I think it was Garnacho who had the shot. So I thought it should have been a penalty, but I was thinking they ain't going to give this after. I thought they're not going to give this in the way of evening up the one that didn't give against us on Monday. So I could kind of tell that we weren't going to get that because of that, which is not right, but it's I think it's probably they probably thought, well, we've got a good opportunity to you know, even things up.
that's why I was asking if we was even or not.
Sorry, Dan. Did you think that was a penalty, John?
I did think it. What, on Monday?
Anana's one, yeah.
I did, yeah. Well, I did, yeah. I mean, I can remember seeing it live, and I saw him clatter the guy, and I was shocked initially that the referee on the pitch didn't give it. So, but then I thought, well, VAR's going to look at that, and the, you know, it's going to be given. There's no doubt about it. So I was absolutely shocked that it wasn't given on VAR. In all honesty,
Dan?
Yeah, I was watching it last week, and as he's come sprinting out and hit him, I thought, oh, and I've looked down and I thought it was definitely going to be a penalty. I've seen, obviously, Twitter and other incidents, like there was one with Leeds last season where the defender got punched in the head and that wasn't a penalty, and I can understand there was a different sort of discussion, even though it's the same sort of incident. But no, last week I thought it was definitely a penalty, and that's why I was asking if we was even or not, because I just knew as soon as there was a slight delay in looking at that handball that it wasn't going to be given. And every single new law, new implementation, that is a penalty. His hands up, it's classed as outside the silhouette, it's clean hit his hand. At first, I wondered if it touched his leg, because there's a rule that says if it hits your leg and then your hand, it can't be handball because it's you can't get your hand either way. But I've seen no any replays. It definitely doesn't hit his leg. It goes straight onto his hand. And I mean, whether it's on target or not doesn't really matter, as Dallo against PSG shows. But for me, it should have been handball. The Maddison one was never a penalty. He's just a bit of a fairy, that lad. He loves a good roll around. Every team's got that, though. But I tell you what, I was a bit worried when Martinez stepped across Romero. I thought it was a bit of a silly thing to do. I've seen him given, but I think it would have been soft, to be honest. I think the game is going soft. I've seen a penalty in the Liverpool game today, which is extremely soft.
I don't going on that. There's just a thigh contact the player, because if it doesn't, I can't see how on earth the player's gone down unless he's been hit by kudos.
Honestly, the Liverpool one today, and I try and be as unbiased as possible in these sort of situations, because my frustration is the referees just aren't good enough. There's no top 6 bias. There's no top 10 bias. Referees are just not very good in a lot of circumstances. And there is slight contact on the player's leg and he chucks himself down. But every player would do that. It's how you gain the advantage. But there needs to be a line in the sand with this sort of stuff. It's getting a bit too soft.
Yeah, I would say so. Andrew Wall has returned from Tottenham. He's been at the game and he's finally made it back in through the door. And the first thing I presume he's made it back in through the door. He might well not be. He could be pulled over at a station somewhere, munching and listening to us. So you'll have to confirm. But he's put, evening, guys. What worried me more wasn't the result, but the performance. At times, we had no idea what to do. Some more reinforcements needed after today, which seems to be the general route of travel for quite a few fans at the moment. So we need to get on to the goals and the chances they had. As much as we dominated the first half, Spurs could have easily gone in 1-0 up with 2 shots that hit the woodwork within 60 seconds. But in the end, it didn't work out that well at all, did it? 2 goals for Spurs. The first one, Sarr from close range. The cross was reasonably good, but deflected, took a lot of the pace off of it, and it just landed as it would do, plumb perfect for him. It couldn't go anywhere else. Could it not behind? No, it just had to land perfectly for him, and he's drilled it into the back of the net. And then the second one, again, similar sort of thing. Cross goes in, but this time Martinez gets a touch and puts it into the back of the net. As a result, 2-0. Anything, John, you think we could have done better in both of these?
Well, as we mentioned for the first goal, it was very poor defending from, whoever was meant, Luke Shaw on the left. He was sort of inside the penalty area and then didn't come out to, try and stop the cross or anything like that. And then you say there's a deflection on the way through and probably didn't react very well after that. Certainly that first goal, some lot to be desired from the defending there. And similar, I suppose you could say similar for the second one, really, from the other side. I think they got in behind too easily, and then poor reaction from Martinez. And I think I thought personally, Onana perhaps could have reacted a little better as well. I mean, I suppose he was very close to him when Martinez sort of got the touch to it, but I think two poor goals to concede, really, from our point of view.
Second round down, we could argue that we could just be pleased that Onana wasn't outside the 18-yard box for that one. But what's your thoughts on the goals and just defending in general for the game? I mean, Dave's put here, played football first and foremost. I'll still argue that the first half we're going in and we're just disappointed not to be ahead. So it's the second half really that we're talking about here, and that's where the defensive issues struck. So what's your thoughts?
I thought it was a case of Spurs sort of taking control, to be honest. I think that they sort of came out in the second half, and he'd obviously had a go because he wasn't happy with how they kept the ball in the shape. And then they came out and they did exactly what he wanted. He got it tactically spot on with his subs as well. So he knew where they were struggling. He just, I can't pronounce his name, but he looks such a good manager. Ange, there you go. He's got him playing the way he wants, really, really quickly, and he's not really bothered about what players he's let go. Someone's put we lost 2-0 to a Spurs side that have just lost Harry Kane. It's going to sound mental, and obviously you can't replace his goals, but you to a point you can change the way you play football, and opens a lot up. Even though Kane's a wonderful, wonderful player, and we should have gone in for him, it could ease Spurs' pressure a little bit. I think Spurs are going to finish quite well this season. I think they're going to do all right. I genuinely don't think the Spurs fans will give him the time he needs because he'll have his ups and downs. But I think it was more of a hats off to Spurs in the second half, more so for starting to do things better against us than in the first half. And it really pushed us back a little bit. Defensively, I think the defense is a little bit unsteady. It's going to be with a new goalkeeper. But Varane he's a brilliant footballer, but he concerns me a little bit with the way he runs. He always looks like he's injured when he's running. There's a few times today that I thought he was pulling up, but he sort of don't go into a full sprint. And I think it's because he's had a lot of injuries. It's just the fine details and touches that we need. The confusing thing for me today mainly was the subs from us. We've got a player that we rate at 30 to 40 million on the bench who's really good at pushing. We don't seem to have a player that can carry the ball in midfield at the minute, like pick it up and run with it. And McTominay's good at that, and he just didn't want to bring him on. So I genuinely think it's just about giving them time. I just hope that he's got it in him that if certain players aren't performing or doing what he wants, that he'll give somebody else a chance, even if he does trust them or whatever. I mean, Kobe Manu sounds like he's going to get a chance when he comes back, but we can't really be waiting on youngsters to come back when we've got players that could slot in. If McTominay's not leaving, he needs to be used. It'll be interesting going forward how the defence lines up. I thought Wan-Bissaka was unlucky to be subbed today. I thought he was one of the better players, but for whatever reason. But it'll just be interesting. Obviously, every goal's down to a fault of some kind. But like I say, giving Kulusevski that sort of space, it's not really acceptable. And then I'm not quite sure what Martinez is doing, to be honest, for the goal. He could have left it. He just had a little bit of a wild swing at it, which is a shame because it took the game away from us. But after the second half performance, I don't really think we deserved anything anyway. I honestly think we could play for another 10 minutes and we wouldn't have scored.
Second half definitely seemed to be like that. And John, Dan's quite right to bring up the subs to a degree. Obviously, Wan-Bissaka was brought off for Dalot. That was when we started to then see the changes because Garnacho came off for Sancho. And rather than that being a like for like, we saw Anthony get taken off, and that was when Bruno got moved into the right-hand wing position. Obviously, Mount came off eventually after the second goal for Pellistri. Rashford came off for Martial, all a little bit too late, really. And it then goes back as well to, do we have the options? Because as Box has put, we had Henderson and Vitek. That's two goalkeepers on the bench, which isn't the first time we had two goalkeepers on the bench, to be fair. But surely we could have let someone like Hannibal, who's she? Hannibal Fernandez and Gore. They could have had a spot on the bench as well. What do you think when you looked at the bench at 1-0 even? Did you look at that and go, we've got game changers on that bench, or were you concerned?
Well, like you say, we're obviously lacking a bit of quality and depth there. You know, the changes, they didn't seem to really have any much positive impact at all. You know, change both wingers. I mean, say they both, you know, Garnacho and Anthony, particularly Anthony, didn't have a good game, but you know, they changed it round and didn't seem to really make any difference. Wasn't really much improvement, I didn't think at all. So I think it shows you that, we're perhaps struggling a little bit for different options. And again, the thing we mentioned about, you know, putting players in unusual positions, try and accommodate them, and you know, you can obviously see it hasn't worked. So yeah, there was not really much of an inspiration coming from any of the subs, and Martial just seems to be, you know, ineffectual. You know, he seems to get us the odd tap in here and there now and again, but that's about all really. So not very not encouraging at all really from any of the subs.
I mean, it is one of those, isn't it, where for Martial particularly, consistency is going to be tricky for him due to the fact that he's not consistent. He has the injuries all the time, and just when he looks like he might get started or get something, he's got himself a little tweak. Maybe it's from the celebrations. I don't know. But Dan's already mentioned it briefly. Kobe Minu obviously has been injured, and Ten Hag said in his press conference before the game that it could be within a sort of a month to 2 months that we might see the return of him. But we can't wait that long, can we, for a midfield that's going to function? And it was functioning reasonably well at pre-season, but we can't pretend that we were having fantastic results in the games where the first team were playing there either. So, what do we do about someone like Maynard, and what do we do about that midfield? Was selling Fred a mistake? Do we need to give McTominay a go? Do we need to go back to the 2 pivot, and maybe it was people like Ole Gunnar Solskjaer that understood that the back 4 in the modern game need a bit more protection, and then you need someone who can get out and burst forward? I mean, what's it going to take to make that midfield what we need it to be?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? I mean, we traditionally, we always seem to start slow. We have done for long time now, and it just seems to repeat every year. It's like the start of last season. We had those first 2 games where we lost and played terrible and got few players in and seemed to turn it around. But obviously, they're all the players now, the same players that are there that came in last season. So it just makes you wonder where we're heading. A lot of the time, we do obviously need, with selling Fred, we do need another sort of holding midfield player. I mean, at these first 2 games, Casemiro's looked very off the pace, struggling to take control of the game at all. So I think we need that what you'd call number 6 midfield player that can sort of help him out and just get a bit more control back. I mean, we saw it at the Wolves game, how they were just sort of, just running through us so many times. They was just non-existent in the middle there. Any protection at all for the back 4, like you said. So, we've got to get somebody in, I think, that can sort that out.
I mean, Dave's saying here that Amrabat's still on the cards, which is a possibility, but we must remember we are going to need to sell some players. We can't just keep on pumping the money out in that respect. But equally, another person who we're having talks with at the moment is Johnny Evans, which isn't a sentence I thought I'd have said 2 months ago, I've got to be honest. Where do you see it going, Dan? Because, I mean, even if we did bring in Johnny Evans, does he make that much of a difference in terms of what we've got in depth-wise? He's unlikely to be a starter, and I wouldn't be convinced it'd be ahead of Lindelof or even Maguire as it stands. What say you?
I can't see him playing a game before the end of the season unless maybe we get a non-league team in the League Cup or something. Sounds like he'd be a signing for the dressing room, which that's the spin that's being put out on social media by certain people, and that is a massive concern. If you're having to bring in Johnny Evans to have an impact on the dressing room, it means we're lacking something in the dressing room, which is a big concern.
That's exactly what I was doing. What on earth could be lacking? And I say this in the nicest possible way, that Johnny Evans is bringing. It's not like bringing in a jester or something like that, to improve morale. What is
I'd
Johnny
imagine
Evans?
he's quite a vocal player. He's always come across that way, very on the ball, outspoken inside the team, not maybe in the press, but inside the team. And maybe they just feel like they need a old head in the dressing room. I don't know, but there's certain things that are happening. I mean, I see the point about Amrabat and other players, but again, just to push back to the Brightons, to the Newcastles, they're getting things from players that you wouldn't expect. Like McTominay's levels should really go up. He's a good player. He's had some really good seasons under us, been underrated, and there seems to be, in my opinion, just from what I see, when I look at it, is you've got your first 11, and then you've got one or two players that know there will be a bit of rotation and they will get some game time, maybe a 3 or 4 list. And then there seems to be a complete disconnect from those 13, 14 players to everybody else. And you can't run a football team like that. It's not going to work. There's something will fall down eventually if that's how it is. You're 1 or 2 injuries away at centre-back from relying on Harry Maguire, who 99% of people won't rate. I'll have the argument with people all day about him, happily. But you're 2 injuries away from relying on Harry Maguire, and he's being hung out to dry in the media. You're a few games away. For example, if Casemiro picks up an injury before the transfer deadline, Scott McTominay's definitely not leaving the club, and he's been hung out to dry. There just doesn't seem to be that connect of a squad at the minute. It's sort of a first team and a few players that know they're going to get given a chance. And then if I was a fringe player at Man United, and from the start of last season to this season, I would say I've only seen one player play badly and be punished for playing badly, and that was Harry Maguire. Everybody else is sort of... De Gea had many moments last season he didn't play well and never got dropped. And we had the discussion on the channel, who do you drop him for? Do you drop him for Tom Heaton? And the same will happen now. If Casemiro doesn't come back into form, who do you drop him for? Because if you say, I know social media is not the best way to trial yourself, but if you put on social media, we should drop Casemiro for McTominay, you're going to get absolutely battered because it makes zero sense. But form has to matter at some point.
But then also, equally, do you put not me up front? No, that poor idea. I'm 5'1". I'm never going to win a header. There's no chance. I'm not Martinez. But Mount is another one who's obviously been mentioned quite a bit. Would you put McTominay on for McTominay and Barry, then who? Cole and York. I mean,
little and large.
On it, the things I get. Like, honestly, people seem to really overestimate my abilities as a footballer. I wouldn't even put myself at the same fringe as Paul Parker, to be honest with you. And he was a very good right back, to be fair. But yeah, Connor seems to agree. And it's interesting that Connor pops in because he was one of those you mentioned. This is the last sort of thing I really want to get out from this before we start looking at things that are perhaps a little bit more jovial. But I think Connor, I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, has put onto Twitter that the vibes under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, the way the club was under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, was better than it currently is now. And it's not just on the pitch, obviously. It does include the whole feeling around the club at the moment. But I kind of see where he's going with that, because it just seems to have this sort of doom and gloom on the pitch. You are literally, it's seen in black and white. You are either a good player or you should be consigned to the scrap heap of the annals of history, and you should never be allowed to put on a shirt again. You're not allowed to be, an average player. I don't think Darren Fletcher would have got very far in social media terms now.
Nope.
I think he would have been absolutely mullered, but yet he's a very successful footballer with lots behind him, and you need those people that do the dirty work. Like, I don't think Manchester United at the moment is at the level that it would need to be at with these players. And actually, it's a bit of a thing, isn't it? Do you think there is a little bit of this as well, that people are seeing this disconnect with the fans? The fact that someone like Scott McTominay, everybody's been wanting to get rid of him ever since his partnership with Fred. Harry Maguire, who has just received more abuse than any footballer I think I've seen on the planet. I mean, I think him and Paul Pogba got some absolute pelters at their time at United. But I would argue that Maguire has been treated just as poorly as Pogba was, with the difference between the two being that Pogba had an attitude that wasn't that of complacency towards trying to make people feel complacent, whereas Maguire has been nothing but professional. Where do we stand on how we feel about the club, as in on the pitch, at the moment? Because we didn't win the first 2 games of the season last season. We ended up finishing top 4. So it's not fatal where we are at the moment. We've actually got 3 points more than we had last season. But we were incredibly lucky to get those 3 points. We could have just as easily come away today with a point, but equally the same against Wolves. We could have had the opposite results. Where do you feel we currently are, John?
I think it's like I said earlier. We just seem to always start so slow every season. It's like your Cities and Arsenal's, Liverpool's. They always seem to come out of the blocks, really quick, and we always seem to be playing catch up every season. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's like these. If we don't, do a pre-season right, we always go on these round the world trips, every pre-season, and I sometimes wonder if that doesn't, do the players a lot of good. They're in all, different countries and different time zones all the time, playing these, for these money spinning friendlies, and then all of a sudden it's the start of the season, and I thought on Monday most of the players didn't look fit. I might well be wrong there, but it just seems to be like the preparation every season, and then we seem to be always scrambling for transfers, new players right at the end of the window. It just never seems to go right for us. Start of every season.
Do you know what, Dan? That's an absolutely brilliant point that John brings up here, because it's always put out, isn't it? It's like Man United on tour. Always Man United on tour. It's never, this is our pre-season. That's not what pre-season's about. Manchester United is without doubt the biggest name in world football. It has been for a ridiculous amount of time. It's why when Onana runs through a Wolves player, it gets spoken about for 7 days on the trot. But we probably won't hear anything about that handball tomorrow morning. It's going to be buried somewhere on page 54 of the Sun, that it might have happened at some point, I'm sure. But actually, we didn't look fit, because it's all about raising the profile of the club as if we really need it. And actually, what would really raise the profile of the club is us winning the Premier League, us being competitive on the pitch. And they didn't look right. The fact that I found it weird this season, this pre-season specifically, that we had a friendly and then a friendly the next day. And they weren't even in the same place. It wasn't like you had a friendly in San Diego followed by a friendly in San Diego, or one that was nearby. He literally took the squad and went, right, you lot are going over to that part and we're going to stay over here in this bit. And the only person that had to travel was Ten Hag. So we've put them under jet lag in pre-season for a start anyway, because they've got to go and travel internationally. They played a couple of games. Are they really putting everything into their training that they should be doing? At this point last season, they went on an 18-kilometre run with Ten Hag because they'd just lost the second game against Brentford and he thought it wasn't acceptable. Do you see that coming? Is there another 18-kilometre run on the horizon for some of these players?
No, I only think that works the once. It's just brand on tour, isn't it? Pretty much pre-season for us. It's getting the brand across the world again and giving the American fans the chance to see us. As obviously junk mode's going to find out next season, the 2 a.m. starts, and actually getting to see them at a normal time and stuff like that. I don't know. It's one of them. If Bruno Fernandes scores the header or we get the penalty and score the penalty, the amount of energy in the legs would be different. It's just when you play a brand of football like Ten Hag, where it's a high press, and you've saw it a little bit under Klopp, and it isn't working, the players look absolutely shattered because it's so intensive. But when they're 2-0 up, they look like they're absolute on electric and they're way ahead of the opposition. I think it's just one of those things. I do think we looked a little bit leggy, but again, I think it's because the result wasn't going our way. Maybe the pre-season too. Just to detour back to what we were saying about Fred and McTominay. So I saw a stat about Fred and McTominay, which was when we finished second, they only lost one game as a pair in that season in the Premier League. So I had to fact check it, which took me a while. It was actually two. It was two losses in 22 starts together. And one of those losses was not as a pair. It was with Pogba. And this, for me, where lies the problem. They got absolutely mullered for 2 seasons for not being good enough. But the football was good. For whatever reason, it just wasn't rated at the time. The same sort of thing with what Maguire's struggling with now. I don't think Maguire should start football against Manchester United. But last season in particular, he was fantastic when he came in. He had a 6-month period where we didn't lose a game of football that he was involved in. Then, obviously, this severe game happens, which, like you see with Martinez today, mistakes can happen. It happens at the highest level. And then suddenly he's getting loads of abuse again. He's never going to be the same player he is. And the point I'm trying to make is Man City were missing 2 of their quality centre-backs today, and the replacements are just as high quality and on the ball pretty much. I think they're winning 1-0 at the minute, and look sharp. They're up to patch with what Pep's doing, what the team's doing. It's all cohesive. There's 25, 26 players that are all doing the same thing. You think about, I rate Alvarez, who Solskjaer wanted to do, who's gone to City. They've shipped Mahrez off for a decent amount of money, and they've just brought in Alvarez, and he knows exactly what they're doing straight away. And it's they've got that connection behind the scenes that, yeah, you might not get game time all the time, but you'll get enough that you're happy here, and then you'll be straight in the squad once a player leaves. I think it's the opposite at Man United at the minute, and you saw it last season. You've got players playing 60 games a season, and they will play 58 to 60 games, and they'll play every single game. Pep will just drop De Bruyne. He'll drop Haaland. He's not bothered. If it means that they'll go further and all the players are happy, you don't care. And you're spot on, Barry. If John O'Shea played in this day and age, he wouldn't be a Man United player anymore. Wes Brown wouldn't be a Man United player anymore. Nicky Butt would have been forced out of the club at some point, because all of these players came to the fore when we needed them, but only in certain situations. I'd imagine a lot of people don't even realise that Keenan Scholes didn't even play 99 final. And do you know what I mean? If you ask, they wouldn't know. So it's about getting the club right, not just on the pitch, but off the pitch as well. It's a mess. It's a big mess at the minute. Ten Hag's done a wonderful job last season. I'm not in any way criticising him. I just think we need to be really strong in the direction we're going, and we need to stay on course for that. He can't waver. So obviously, I was on last week's show, so I didn't get to talk about Maguire, but particular, you'll have people believing something's been said about the money he wants, etc., and it must be gospel because it's been said in the press. And then David Ornstein reported that, well, actually, Maguire could have gone and hasn't gone because United have basically vetoed it because we've been priced out of a replacement for him. And this is the problem. That can't happen. If Ten Hag doesn't want Maguire, and Maguire's got a move to West Ham that he could take, you sell him. You find a replacement at another point. If you don't want him in and around your squads, you just get rid. You can't keep them around because you can't afford a replacement. You promote a youth player, bring in Johnny Evans. Just give Ten Hag the squad that he wants and he trusts and build from there. If he doesn't want McTominay, just get him sold. Don't Casemiro's been injured, we'll have to keep him. Just get rid and move on that way. While it's like this, it's going to be to and from it.
It does make you wonder who's making the decisions, who's bringing them in. I mean, again,
the ownership doesn't help.
The message, I don't think, which is a bit of a shame, but it was that one about who will we blame now, because it had a good list of people, but literally all of them were gone. It's a bit of a shame. Doesn't
I understand
the video, wasn't it?
Yeah, I understand the point fully because it's and this is what I'm saying. Harry Maguire will leave the club and they'll go, "Oh, that's a relief. The performances will improve." He's not played in any of the games, and the performances are in the toilet. It's bigger than one player. It's a whole squad of players that's the issue at the minute, and it's just not quite there yet. I just hope he's given time.
Yeah, there we go. I finally found it. There. So this time last year we could play De Gea, gone. Doesn't even have a club at the moment. Maguire
hasn't kicked the ball
around the squad too much. Fred sold. He's off into Turkey. Lindelof on the bench. Van der Beek looks like he's on his way. Weghorst longer with us, thank God. And Sabitzer, who's also not had the loan renewed. But again, you look at a couple of those players, Weghorst and Sabitzer, were players that came in under the Ten Hag era. So it will be very interesting That's for sure. Seeing how we choose to move forward. And speaking of moving forward, now seems like the ideal time to do just that. And something interesting happened then, because as you know, last week you pestered me, and I that is exactly what you wanted me to do, and that was we both came up with our very own prediction as to what the league was going to look like. And I must say that if I knew now, or if I knew then what I knew now, I might not have come up with what I came up with. I don't know if you feel the same, but
I can't remember.
we're going to have a quick look. So this is Dan's, and John, you need to pay particular attention to this right now, as the only unbiased person here. We're going to cover you up so that we'll cover all of us up, actually, on this one. So Dan, he basically said City to win the league, Liverpool, Arsenal, Man United to complete the top four, Newcastle, Chelsea, Spurs in 5th, 6th and 7th. The bottom three, Wolves, Sheffield United and Luton. What do you reckon to that, John?
Yeah, it looks like not a bad shout. That certainly the sort of bottom half, probably what I might expect. Only thing I might say is I could perhaps see Brighton being a lot higher than that.
Just about to say, I think that's the only team that I might swap. Yeah,
I think I don't know what it's about Brighton, but I think on their day they can beat anybody. I think. I know that they keep losing these players, and they just seem to get better. It's incredible.
Well, they certainly
really.
didn't make Wolves look good, did they?
I think they're top as it stands tonight on goal difference. I know there's only 2 games, but yeah, credit to them.
There we go. It's that one. Now you can have a look at mine. So this is where I went with it. So I said Manchester City to win the league, with Manchester United second, Liverpool 4th, Arsenal 3rd, Newcastle, Chelsea and West Ham to complete the top 7. I thought Spurs out of it. No way. No Kane, not going to happen. Unlike you, I went Brighton 13th, so I put them even lower there. And then my bottom 3, Forest, Burnley and Luton Town. We hate Luton down here in Stevenage. What's your thoughts on my top 20 there?
Yeah, I think Newcastle will be. Did you got Newcastle 5th there? I think.
No, I had Newcastle. Yes, 5th. I had Liverpool just pipping them.
Yeah, I think Newcastle are going to be up there this season. I do. I think they're going to be pushing City. I do, as much as it pains me to say, but I think they could be. I think they could give City a bit of a run for the money this year. They might. I'm not saying they're going to win it, but I think they'll definitely be top 4. And again, like I say, I think Brighton will be up there again, top 6, maybe higher.
Which puts us in an interesting. Again, manager stubborn has his favourites. When every manager has their favourites, and I defy anyone to prove to me they don't.
They do.
They do. Of course they do. That's literally what the job's all about. I've got my favourites. You see me bringing them on every single week, and asking them every single week, John. Being rejected every single week.
Barry.
What a party life. Barry hates Luton, but he's wearing Luton's orange colour. I can tell you. Number 1, this is from Camp Buckskin, which is in America, where I went and took some scouts. And genuinely, I'll tell you the reason why I'm wearing orange. It's because I started a new Football Manager save, and I like to wear the colours of the team that I've been given. And I got Mansfield. I don't really have anything yellow. This was the closest. Sorry, not Mansfield, Maidstone. And I didn't have anything that was the colour. So this was the closest thing that I had to it. So hence I wore the orange. But yes, Dave, that is absolutely brilliant. And I'm incredibly impressed. And yes, Connor, that's exactly why you're not on. Let's not pretend you weren't asked. Right. John, the reason why I said you had to look at both those, it was so very important, is because by the end of this poll, it finished 50-50. We put a poll out saying who do we think is most likely to have got it right. Dan was losing, but he's obviously got a couple of his mates to come in and click Dan. Because
I reckon what happened is they watched us play Wolves and went, actually,
He's making an account just for this. So John, you're going to be the decider potentially as to who is going to get the bragging rights for the start of the season. Who do you think is most likely to have it right? So I will show you it one more time just to help
have
you.
another look.
I'm just going to point out that Barry has Brighton 13th. That should be the end of the conversation.
Dan's, like I say, he's gone Luton bottom as well. And I have gone that way. City, United, Arsenal, Liverpool, Newcastle just out. So it's your choice. Which one are you going for?
Oh, gosh, putting me on the spot there. Jeez.
It is putting you on the spot. And I don't want you to take the fact that you've known me longer than you've known Dan. None of that. Just be honest. You're not going to be angry. You'll still be allowed on next week. People are allowed their comments just to prove it. Who is it? This one has just been put up. I mean, I completely disagree with this. I don't think he is too selfish. I don't think he hasn't got a football brain. I think he's done brilliantly. He's just not
back on the left.
Exactly. But he's allowed the opinion, and that's why we still put it on there so people can have it. So if you want to say Dan, you say Dan. What do you reckon? I mean, to be fair, some people already have. Connor's gone for it, but then he's just saying that because he's wound up because I've had a go at him and made him look silly all the time. So we understand that. Franz has gone for Dan if we have a striker, which I don't understand, because if we have a striker, surely there's more chance of us finishing second there is a finishing fourth. But who knows? So which way are you going, John? Are you consigning me to defeat?
I'm sorry, Barry. I'm going to have to go with Dan's.
I had a feeling you would. Because I've got to be honest, if I was in your situation right now, I probably would go for Dan's as well, just purely because I can't see us finishing second if we play like that. So there we go. But it gets worse because Dan also asked me to get involved in this fantasy Premier League rubbish, which was incredibly annoying because I don't tend to do well at these sort of things, mainly because I start and just forget. And we had a nightmare this week last week, because I actually put Haaland as my captain, but it didn't save. Obviously, didn't push the button for save. So I didn't get my double points for Haaland as captain. Equally, I haven't made him captain this week, so I'm pleased that he's done pretty much next to nothing so far this evening. But because we are good on this show, we're going to finish off by showing you sort of what's going on there, because I've got to be honest, it's quite funny. But it will take a second. Just a minute. Just got to rip that away from there. There we go. That should work. Now, problems with live technical problems. 1 second. Here we go. That's the one right there. So if we just share that. And the reason why I wanted to show you this is purely because there are some fantastic names in our fantasy league. So I felt like you needed to see that, and also just to see whereabouts I am. Now, what we'll try and do is make that a bit larger. Hopefully that has done it for you. It has. Excellent. Right, so here we are. Some fantastic names. Top of the list, by the way, is Grace Gunn, well known on the women's channel, everyone. So she's there with 89 points already. Backstreet Moyes, I thought was a particularly good name there by Andy Boyle. Rashford's Rockets by Charlie, often seen on the women's channel. Botman and Robin, which is very nice. I did originally read that as Batman and Robin and thought, what's he playing at? But now that I've made that bigger, I can see it's an O. So that's quite good. Stranger Ings there from Gareth, also seen on the women's channel quite a lot. I thought that was superb. Then you get a bit further down. Anthony's gone down, Dreaming of Glory. I think you can keep dreaming, Anthony, on that one. Graham Falk, esteemed journalist, has joined us, pending moderation. Nice name. Connor, Earth, Wind and Maguire. This is the guy who last week on the women's channel had never watched The Lion King, but he's managed to name his fantasy Premier League team after an 80s band. I'm absolutely gobsmacked. Andrew Wall, obviously we've gone down with Andrew with Anana, What's My Name? And disappointingly for me there, in 19th spot, but I have moved up a position, which cheers me right up. Any particular names there that caught your eyes, chaps, that you quite enjoyed?
I thought Backstreet Boys was good.
Yeah, Backstreet Boys, that was quite amusing, and Connors as well. Yeah.
Well, Backstreet's back. Boys back.
No, you never say never in football, do you?
Wow, who knows? But there we go. So we'll keep you updated on how that's looking and whether or not I've had any rise up the channels, or if I end up forgetting completely and Dan can get his glory there. Because when the league looks exactly like I said it would, you best believe I'll be going for the bragging rights. So there we are. Gang, it's been a really interesting weekend. Thank you very much for joining us for immediate reaction. This time next week, we will be reacting, obviously, to Manchester United against Nottingham Forest, which is going to be a 3:00 kickoff. So maybe helpful because we're not going to be under the glare of live television as well and having all of that to contend with. And it's at home, which generally seems to be a bit better. So as we're not going to be about for the beginning of that match, I'm going to be forced to ask you, I know you don't want to, what your prediction might be for said game. So based on how we've got on, obviously we don't know the team he's going to pick, but Dan, where do you see it going?
I think he'll make one, maybe two changes. I can't see any more than that. I'm really worried about Gibbs White. Because
just a reminder, you've got Forest finishing 17th this season.
I have, yeah. I'm really worried about Gibbs White because he started the season on fire, like breaking the lines really, really well. So we need to make sure we're on it. And obviously, Anthony Elanga returning as well, which is going to be another dodgy one, which I don't like when it happens. I think we're going to win 2-1, though.
2-1. That's another goal conceded. I don't even want to know how that game pans out. John, first question, will you be there?
Yes, I should be there, all being well. Yes.
Excellent.
Me too, Dave.
What do you think you're going to be witnessing?
Gosh, I think it's going to be...
Brave here, sorry, he's hoping 6-0.
No, I think it's going to be another similar to the Wolves game. I think it's going to be tight, tense, and I think we might just sneak a 1-0 late on again. I think might be not going to be very pleasant viewing, I don't think.
We need to play our way into form. That's the problem.
And you know what? Maybe Forest is the game to do it. And I seem to remember when a certain Ole Gunnar Solskjaer came back, Nottingham Forest was the team that he had to play against. And when he did so, it was a pretty convincing win. So I'm going to go 4-0 to us, not Forest. It's not that bad. I think it's going to click because at some point Ten Hag's got to do something about it. So I think he'll have a little switch around. He'll make a few things happen. I hope he's watched the channel, as I know all the managers do. So I'm sure that Eric will make the right decisions. We'll see Rashi out on the left-hand side, possibly with Marshall up top. And yeah, maybe a little bit.
Do we know if Hoyland's fit for that game next week?
He said a few weeks, didn't he? So it wasn't just about being fit. It was about training and integrating him in with the squad. But to be honest, could he do much worse than we've done so far?
I'm hoping maybe we see him on the bench.
Yeah, maybe. Fingers crossed.
And that would be helpful. We spent the entire episode talking about needing a striker whilst forgetting the fact we've got one. That's how negative and bad life is feeling right now. Completely forgotten we did buy a striker. He just hasn't had the chance to turn up yet. So there we go. This was an interesting point, just to finish Dav there. ECH said his midfield played well, second half concerning. I think he didn't say played well, just that he'd seen some good things. And as Fran says, he's obsessed with defending his players. He can simply decline to comment. I kind of get what he's doing.
You've got to defend your players.
Players in public, but I would like to believe that when he was in the dressing room, they all received the traditional rocket and hairdryer treatment. Would Ten Hag have hairdryer treatment? Being a fellow baldy like myself, you can understand Fergie having a hairdryer. Would someone like Ten Hag require such an implement? Does he give him something different? Who knows? But there we go. Listen, boys, pleasure. John, thank you so much for getting on. I hope you have a good match next week, and we look forward to seeing you again on the show. So thank you very much. Dan, lovely to have you along as well, mate. Thanks for popping along. Anything exciting coming up on the men's channel? There's nothing new coming up until Saturday Night Live, I don't think. We're always in discussion to how we can improve it and what we can start. So there may well be something in the pipeline. But until then, as we say, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, everybody. Cheers in the comments for keeping us going. I'll see you all next week. Good night.
See you later.